Hello and welcome to the TRConnect Covid-19 webinar, the first in our TRConnect webinar series. My colleague Michael Barrett and I are absolutely delighted to see so many of you in attendance. We have absolutely the maximum number of attendees here today, just over 500, and we received 899 registrations, so I apologise to those who could not join us live today, but I promise you will be able to gain access to the full webinar after today, and that information will be coming to you shortly. I believe the staggering number of registrations we received is testament to the absolute willpower, sheer determination and desire from you all to bring about a post-COVID-19 recovery as quickly and as efficiently as possible. It also proves the absolute necessity of a platform such as this dedicated to our industry. I also wanted to flag now that we will be making a very important announcement towards the end of the webinar today, so please stay tuned for that. Before I introduce the speakers, I'd like to remind you that this is just the first in our webinar series, and that more information on the topics to be discussed in the following weeks and months will be shared with you shortly via trbusiness.com and our social media platforms. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel of speakers who will be joining Michael and myself today. The webinar will kick off with an illuminating consumer insights presentation from Peter Mohn. I'm sure most of you will already know him. He is a CEO and owner of Mindset, Swiss research agency. This presentation will be followed by an equally fascinating presentation by Anson Bailey, who is Head of Consumer and Retail for the Asia Pacific Division at KPMG. I will then invite three panellists to share their perspective and reaction to the data and insights we all see today. One of those panellists is Sarah Branchino, who is the President of the Duty Free World Council. Another is Lisa Bauer, who is the President and CEO of Starboard Cruise Services. And finally, we have Stuart Dierberg, General Manager of Nestlé International Travel Retail. Thank you all so much for joining us today for this important industry webinar. I really do appreciate it. Now, without further ado, Peter, please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. I will start introducing quickly what we actually, the research we have been conducting very recently. We actually talked to 1,500 international travelers from all around the world, just to get a feeling of how are people feeling about the situation, how will they actually behave after the travel bans are over. And then, it's a survey that's really wasn't really digging into specific nationalities overall, so we don't really want to look into how the Chinese behave versus other nationalities or other regions of the world. It's just to get a good picture of the overall travelers worldwide. So actually the most important question to start off with is to get the overall feeling of the participants and to see that how does this virus impact their household income, their living conditions. As you can see, more than 8 out of 10 people say that the virus situation actually has negatively impacted their household income, so they have less income available. And 9 out of 10 say that the living conditions have changed. And I guess all of us, especially in this business, are feeling this right now. And we want to explore a bit further regarding what does this mean for you regarding expenditure and how much you're going to spend. And actually, out of these people, so 8 out of 10 said that they tend to going to spend less in the near future. And but what I think is quite interesting, that a quarter of the people said that they are strongly considering purchasing different products in the near future. So they actually are looking into local products, more sustainable products, more environmental friendly products. So I think this is something, an important message that everybody should think about, and because people have been staying more at home, buying more local products, and this actually has changed the attitudes of many people, and will do so too in the future. But this is, of course, a very crucial slide. So just to make sure that we are all on the same page, that it's very important to understand, we talk to people who actually did travel in the last 12 months. So these are people who do travel at least once per year, but of course we also have a part of travelers who travel frequently for business, etc. If you can see here that 22% of the people we spoke to, they said as soon as the travel bans are lifted, they would like to start traveling again immediately. whereas around 4 out of 10 said, well, I would actually consider traveling via again the first 3 months. So if you do the math, you can see that 6 out of 10 will most likely pick up air travel again within the first 3 months. And at the other part of the scale, you can actually see that only around 20% said that they were going to wait at least 6 to 12 months until they feel comfortable going on a plane again. So I personally was quite positively surprised about this chart. I think it's how it is. I've been also asked if there are some differences between the regions and segments. And yes, indeed, we could see that people in Asia are more likely to pick up the traveling again. I guess it's also because of how the situation in Asia is right now compared to now in the United States or in Europe and some parts of it. So, and also we can see that people who used to travel a lot are more likely to start traveling again versus those who travel very infrequently. We also wanted to know regarding the business travelers, and actually around a third of the people said that in the next 6 months after the travel bans have been lifted, they are very likely to travel not at all or significantly less. And of course, we wanted to know why, what the reasons are. And it's quite obvious that most people said that the company asked me to reduce the number of business trips, to save money, and overall, because of the overall economic slowdown, it will require fewer international trips overall. So that leads to people regarding business will not travel as much. But I personally was quite surprised. I thought this number was going to be higher. So still 2/3 of the people are saying that they will actually go back to normal. And there were also actually a share of people who said they will actually travel more in the beginning because they need to pick up and catch up what they've been missing the last couple of months. Also, of course, the share of online meetings will increase. So people who have been using Zoom lately, they will see how convenient it is. And so that's something that's going to improve a lot, increase a lot in the future for sure. But also some travelers are worried about if they can actually reach their travel destinations because there might be less flights available, or there might be cancellations, etc. And also around 20% of the people said that future events have been canceled. And we in travel retail know very well what this means also for our travels. Now, if you talk about people who were planning leisure and holidays trips in the future, you could actually see that 4 out of 10 said they're going to not travel at all, or travel significantly less 6 months after the travel bans are lifted. And the main reasons for that is that they prefer to avoid the crowds at the airport, of course, on the planes or at the destinations. So they feel a bit worried about the safety, getting the virus themselves, or they're a little bit worried about this whole situation, how it's going to be at the airports, and which is very understandable. But also 6 out of 10 people said that they would prefer to save money in upcoming months because they have either having less income or they don't know about their actual jobs. So they're quite careful how they spend their money. But also people are worried about how it's going to be at the destination. Are many activities or like museums or tourist spots going to be closed? And they also quite often worried about the flight cancellations and other things might not still be available. And a quarter of the people said, well, they're also a little bit scared about they could fall ill while abroad, and catching the virus in other countries is a bit scary for quite many people. Now, then we asked them, the next time if you fly again, would you actually consider visiting the duty-free shops when the international bans are lifted? And overall, we can see that 16% of all the people we talked to say they will actually most likely not visit the shop because of that. And the categories most affected would be perfumes, alcohol, and skincare. And then it's quite interesting to see if they would actually consider purchasing in the duty-free shops on their next trip. And about a third of people say, yes, I would actually consider purchasing the same categories I usually buy. Whereas 13%, so around every 7th person, said they would consider purchasing, but they might buy something else than they usually do. And we are actually going to do another big survey in June, where we'll actually dig deeper into what kind of new products they would look into and what the reasons are. So we're going to get a more in-depth understanding of this in our next survey coming up. And then we looked at the whole airport environment. So we listed a set of services and places where they could shop. We asked which sectors will actually be the most affected in your next trip or the trips in the next 6 months at airports. And then we could see that the areas that are the least affected would be the airline lounges. So those people who go to the lounges will, of course, go there and they kind of like to escape there. But also quite positive news regarding the takeaway outlets and the kiosks and convenience stores and the electronic shops. So they're all above 40%. But also the sunglass shops, jewelry shops, and branded clothing shops seem to be a comfortable place for people to go after the travel bans are lifted. Now, if we look into the right side of the chart, we can see which are the most affected airport shops and services. And we could actually see that the playground for kids are most affected, but also restaurants, cafes, and bars. So F&B is really very, very crucial. And also other aspects we can see. A little bit more than half of the people said that in duty-free shops will be a place that they will probably try to avoid if they're crowded, etc. Well, I think it's very, very important for everybody involved here to see how important it will be to show how each of these areas take care of these security and safety measures. So everything is taken care regarding cleaning the place, etc., and also how to approach the people. And we also asked the people, how will your actually habits when you're in the airport change? And 2 out of 3 said, well, they actually think they're going to change their behavior at the airports. And I think that the very obvious reason is that 9 out of 10 said I will spend more time just on my seat with my laptop, with my mobile phone, and they will try to interact with other passengers, and of course they will try to isolate from the crowds. So if people see a big line somewhere in shops or in restaurants or anything, of course it will be a place they will avoid very, very clearly. And then we actually talked about different aspects within the shop because we want to understand, and all for you people, you retailers, airports, and brands who work in the shops, we actually wanted to see, so what is their feeling, how is their behavior going to be when they're inside the shops? And 62% said actually they will actually refrain from being really close to retail ambassadors, sales staff, and duty-free shops. And so it actually shows that it's going to be very, very important that when sales staff approach the actual passengers, that they have to be very careful and sensitive about this, because obviously they want to keep the 2 meters distance and to make sure that they don't make the shoppers feel uncomfortable. That's a very, very important aspect. 45% said they will actually try to refrain from testing products in duty-free shop. And some of them said that they will completely avoid testing all kind of items, but some are going to be a little bit more careful. So this is also for those who actually have activations, etc. It will be important to understand what it means that almost half the people are worried about this. Half of the people actually will refrain from unnecessarily touching products, so they will typically only grab what they need and nothing else, which also will lead to some new measures and information, signs, and also help from the sales staff to help the passengers because they're worried about this aspect. And this actually came quite a surprise when we asked them, would you more likely to shop online and to collect your items upon boarding or at arrivals? And only 12% said that they were more likely to shop online and do this, which again shows that our industry is missing out on a lot of opportunities regarding this. Because if you look on the right side, a big part of these people said, well, I don't think the airports I plan to travel to from offer such kind of services, which might be true for some of the airports, but for some of the airports, this is not the case. So it's very, very important to communicate this as possible, to shop online if the airport and the retailer offer these kind of services. And if you come into the actual plane, around a third of the people said they're actually concerned about the hygiene of the seat after this outbreak. And I think it's actually quite a positive number. So, which means that 2/3 of the passengers would actually kind of trust the airlines that they will clean the airplanes and the seats very, very clearly well before people take the flight. But around a third said that they're worried about it, and many of them will not take any additional measures. But some of them will, of course, try to touch as least as possible on the seat. And also the same thing if you look at the in-flight entertainment, people will rather tend to use their own personal device for entertainment, or they will clean it before they use it. So also here you can see people are going to be cautious and be careful about how to use it. So I think overall it's important for the airlines to communicate how they clean everything, how good they take care of individual seats, etc., because this will actually then lead to that the passengers will feel more comfortable. And even if you come to the drinking, eating behavior in the airports, almost half of them were a bit concerned about the hygiene of the food, and some will actually even bring their own food or actually refrain from drinking or eating at all on the plane. And then regarding the magazines and press available, I think people will actually keep on using them and reading them if possible, or some of them will actually not read them at all. It's not of the highest concern. It's more actually the seat and the in-flight entertainment, most of the food. And the last information chart we would like to share is if they would prefer that the airline staff and the passengers would be wearing face masks on their plane. And here we were quite positively surprised that 62% said yes, they would feel safer and reassured if they do so, but actually quite a significant part would also feel comfortable without that. And even a quarter of the people said no, actually would feel a bit intimidated, would feel a bit strange if the airline staff would be wearing face masks. So quite interesting. And around half of the people would feel more comfortable if the actual passengers would do so too. So this is just a quick overview of the information we gathered. And again, as Michael and Charlotte mentioned earlier, we're very happy to share more information during this session if you have any questions. Also, you can also contact us directly at the email below if you have any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter. Before we hand over to Anson, we're just going to have our first poll now. You heard Peter talk about travelers and when they will resume international travel once the travel restrictions have been lifted. We want to ask you the same question. So if you could just choose from one of the answers you're going to see now on your screen, that would be great. We'll give you a few seconds to answer that. So you can see the majority are going for immediate. No, it's figures are changing as more and more people give their answers in. So I'll give you a few more seconds. Still, 2/3 of attendees have answered so far. So if the rest of you could just make your vote as well, and then we'll show the results immediately after we close the poll. A few more. Okay. We're going to close the poll. Still a few more haven't voted, but we're going to close the poll now, and we'll show the results. So you can see that immediately 27%, the first few people who responded that was the majority, but then within 3 months took the lead and stayed in the lead. So just under half of all those attending will travel within the first 3 months, and within the first 6 months, 18%, and only if mandatory health screenings are in place at airports, 1 in 10 attendees. So that's interesting. Interesting to compare that with the results from the Mindset research, which you'll get after this webinar. All the presentations both presentations will be sent to you. So you don't have to worry about taking screenshots on the slides. Right, thank you very much. We're going to now hand over to Anson Bailey. Anson, I'm just going to share your screen now, and over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Michael. Great to be on the TRConnect webinar. Thanks to my friend Peter for all of his sharing. I am hopefully just going to share my screen with you as well. I do hope it is sharing. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Can you see that, Peter? Or Michael, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. You just need to go into presentation mode now.
Okay, great. Okay, excellent. So I really wanted to very quickly, and I'm under orders from Michael to do 10 minutes. So I'm going to start my timer right now, Michael. Really wanted to just share with everybody on the call, on the webinar, changing consumer behaviors in this post-COVID-19 world. And I do think that people now are really starting to discuss about, well, life after COVID-19. There is this new normal that I just wanted to share with everybody. And I think we're going to see things happening at different speeds. We're going to see different regions come out of this. What's very interesting here in China, for example, is that in the first 3 days of the Golden Week holidays, which start on May the 1st, we saw 85 million domestic tourist trips across China. So again, those numbers, I think we'll all agree, are quite significant. So we are coming out of lockdown, and I'm sure we're all very relieved because we've been in lockdown since the end of January. And there's mixed news as well. We probably heard the news a few days ago about Mr. Warren Buffett disposing of $50 billion worth of airline stocks across the US. But also, this is time for a lot of those companies to really take stock. The airlines, the airports, they're now driving some really interesting new tech and new innovation. There is increasingly a focus on the customer, and of course the use of new tools like AI, machine learning, as well as data, and of course 5G. And we had a very interesting conversation with the airport authority here in Hong Kong at the beginning of last week, talking about their digital twin initiative and how they're using some very cool tech, and they're actually using a new platform which is called Unify, which is really started out life in gamification. So there are, I think, a number of interesting things that are happening. I'm going to move quickly on to say that at the beginning of January, before COVID-19 broke out, we saw some interesting discussions at, for example, the National Retail Federation in New York, one of the big global meetings of the year. People were talking about the need to be more people-centric, the need for customer experience, the need for those intelligent, responsive supply chains, also the use and not just retaining data. I think that's very important. Trust the platforms, the new business models, cooperation, collaboration, and a big focus, of course, on technological intensity. Now, again, the 6 drivers of consumption that I just wanted to remind everybody about, which I think are important to all of us, are value, convenience, experience, choice, purpose, privacy, and safety. And I'm going to go through this very quickly. Don't worry, Michael and Charlotte are going to share the slides with you after this webinar. I'd also say, of course, if we look at the current state of the market, the pandemic is impacting all of us. I do believe we're absolutely going to see this accelerated move towards a cashless society. Obviously, increased demand for personal hygiene, health, and wellness. There is a move, without a doubt. We're seeing these changing consumer behaviors and a big focus on online and e-commerce. So there's some really, I think, interesting things that are happening. But also, what are businesses faced with right now? And I have to say that, of course, business continuity, cash flow management, supply chain issues, as I mentioned, the changing consumer behaviors, last mile delivery, health safety, wellness, and hygiene standards, really important. And you've got to look at how you can please your customers during this pandemic. And I think Peter already talked about the heightened concern about safety. So you've got to think safety first. You've got to get closer to those customers. You've got to improve your digital channels. You've also, I think, got to deliver on your values. And if we look at here in China, those Chinese consumers are slowly returning. I just mentioned the 85 million that are traveling at the beginning of this month. But China is not immune. 600,000 businesses have already closed down across China. GDP, retail, significantly down. But as I said, the light at the end of the tunnel, the lockdown has ended. But of course, we're not going to see traveling overseas anytime in the immediate future. We are seeing social retailing. We're seeing things like live streaming. And if I just talk about those future destinations in 2020 for a second, it is interesting because, of course, domestic travel, road trips, they are going to be the focus, I think, across China. As we know, China is a big, big place, Michael. But it is interesting how Thailand, Russia, Japan, they seem to be very popular destinations. And it's also equally telling that, of course, the United States, which was very much at the top of the list for a lot of those Chinese travelers, has disappeared with the current strain in US-China trade relations. And of course, with the concern of the coronavirus as well. Digital retail, this is something close to my heart, and I've been talking a lot about in the last couple of years. I think the message is coming through. Consumers are absolutely more digitally minded and tech savvy than ever before. Again, data. I think that's going to power growth, and equally, we've got to be able to use that data. I've done a number of large-scale surveys, and what we found was that, 77% of those executives collected all of the data. Only about 30% of them actually used that data. We're also seeing greater focus, of course, on transparency, the new generation, like the Generation Z, driving change, and of course, smart cities are now taking shape. And we at KPMG issue these emerging tech radars, and it is very interesting to see what do we see in the next few years. In the next 3 to 5 years, there's already a lot of that technology. What's going to happen with coronavirus, with COVID-19? That technology is going to get accelerated. So that's something I think for all of us to think about. Also, we live in this mobile first world. And again, I just wanted to remind people, when we look at platforms, of course, like Amazon, but if we look at it in China, we've got Alipay platform, we've got WeChat, the platform, 1.2 billion on Alipay, 1 billion on WeChat, 3.5 billion smartphone users in the world. That has grown, and literally from 2.5 billion about 3 years ago. 400 million internet users and growing across ASEAN. 765 million mobile payment users in China alone. Those numbers are staggering, and they're continuing to grow. It was literally 578 million when I last checked about 6 months ago. So, again, we're not, this is the new normal, ladies and gentlemen. We're not seeing a return to the old normal. As I mentioned, those platform businesses are growing. And it's interesting because we are seeing the changing ownership from assets to the ownership of access. And I think that is something we all need to be thinking about. The other thing that I would say is that online has also inflated a lot of those customer expectations. And if I look a little bit about some of the players, Taobao, JD.com, of course, Amazon, Facebook, and the likes of Tmall, but they've all been offering unlimited selections. Instant delivery, transparent pricing, personalization, and flexible payments. We need to up our game. Traditional retailers, and I think traditional players in travel retail as well, have got to up their game. And a couple of things at KPMG that we have been talking about in the last couple of months is the 4 phases of response that we all need to consider. And that is the reaction, that first 1 or 2 months. We're now into this resilience phase. Hopefully we're going to see a recovery, but it could be literally the next 6 to 12 months, and then equally this new reality. So again, the new normal is here, and it's here to stay. What am I seeing? I'm seeing continued investment in these new economy companies, a big focus, of course, as we said, on e-commerce. We're seeing the rapid adoption of digital technologies, social media, the KOLs, the tribe marketing, the microbloggers. We're seeing this leap directly from cash to digital payments. And I've seen that, again, it's amazing to see it happen here in Asia. And as I said, data, that's the new gold. And of course, those later low data costs are also helping to support all of these new on-demand services. The major hiccup or issue I see is around fulfillment and logistics infrastructure as well. And then really just to leave everybody with a couple of points that I think we all need to really look at is be ready for all this emerging technology like AI and blockchain. It will profoundly impact all of us. It will impact our supply chains. I just talked about data and the innovation side. That's critical. You've also got to look at social good and purpose, because I'm hearing a lot about, are you a purpose-led corporate? And your consumers are watching you very carefully. In fact, those consumers, you've got to be following them on their journeys, and they're also demanding a lot more transparency. Final comments, and I apologize, Michael, I am slightly over 11.30. Consumers will still travel, but in stages. Domestic travel will lead the way, but those consumers are still going to want expert guided choices. They want higher engagement, but obviously safety in mind, personalization, human touch at a distance, trusted relationships, and exceptional in-store or on aircraft experiences. Michael, thank you very much. A little bit over, but as you well know, that's a record for me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anton. That was extremely fascinating. I've jotted down lots and lots of notes. And I first of all wanted to actually go to our panelists and see how they are reacting to this information. Sarah, I'd actually like to start with you, if I may. There's an awful lot of data and insight we've just heard from those two excellent presentations. Are there any specific highlights that, or things that surprised you most that you perhaps want to mention?
Well, I've been fascinated to see how consumers are going to be reacting to the opportunity to travel again. I'm one of those who would go immediately. I'm desperate to see family and friends, and but take precautions on the way. And I was encouraged to see that there are a lot of people who would travel immediately or in the first few months. I was also fascinated to see the data that Peter provided about how people would react to purchasing. It fits in very well with the study with the survey that the Duty Free World Council is just about to launch, in which we're asking both retailers and suppliers to contribute to creating some kind of global standard for recovery for our stores. A lot of people are saying that maybe we should not look at distancing in the travel environment, because the test should have been done before you arrive in the travel environment. But if you look at the data that Peter is showing, I think people are still going to be expecting that. So that was really helpful. Thank you, Peter.
Apologies, I was on mute. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question for you, Sarah. It's more to do with the way the industry will recover. And in order to do that, we will of course need to come together with our industry associations. So my question for you is, how does the industry need to collaborate through our associations in order to get the support that we need?
Okay, so in practical terms, we've been working on two levels. The first is that we've been looking to make sure we increase our share of voice As an industry, we know that traditionally we tend to fall between two stools. We're not the aviation sector nor the maritime sector. We're somewhere buried in them, and yet we are a vital component of all of those. So when we talk to governments and try and talk to the greater media that's not our wonderful trade industry media, we find that we are a little bit invisible, and it's been a real effort to try and increase that share of attention out there. So the various regional associations and the World Council itself have been reaching out recently to governments, and in some cases to airports themselves or cruise lines themselves, to make sure that we don't fall between the crack. There are some packages and some support out there, but some of them are very much based on domestic retail, and some of them are for the aviation or maritime sector, and a lot of emphasis has been on airlines. But again, we're buried in the second layer under there. And so we have been working very hard to make sure that any stimulation measures that are initiated are scrutinised to see what opportunities there are for our business. We've also been pointing to the opportunity for, in the post-COVID world, for duty and tax-free retail to be a significant boost in revenues to the aviation and maritime sector, which have been so hard hit. And so we really need to emphasise that further. We're getting requests now for information, which is encouraging, about how we would operate if we opened again. And I think you'll have seen the press release from the European Travel Retail Confederation on that. But we find also that in talking to authorities, we're falling a little bit between transport and health. We're not sure whether transport is leading or health is leading, and we're not really very visible to health. We've got a good profile within transport. So that's a little bit hampered where we've been at the moment. And then the second layer is the one I just referred to. We are making sure now that we have a process and a protocol for moving forward when recovery happens. As Anson said, hopefully we are moving towards that now. A lot of companies have done some sterling work on looking at how they would recover individually. But governments are not talking often to individual companies. They're talking to trade associations, they're talking to central bodies, global bodies such as the Airports Council International, and to the Cruise Lines Association. And so we do need to have an overarching set of robust principles that we can share as to how we would operate instead of expecting governments to come to us individually. So that's the big thrust for this next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Sarah. That was really a great important update. Thanks for that, Lisa. I'd like to come to you in terms of the cruise line perspective. I'm guessing some of the insight and the data that you saw there was quite illuminating. What was most surprising for you?
So, a couple things. Based on some of the data that Peter shared, I think there's a lot of consistency between what we're seeing with the frequent travelers, the people that have traveled being 6 out of 10, ready to travel again. Very similar in the cruise industry, based on the research that I've seen. Those folks that were first-time cruisers or considering a cruise, the size of that market has really shrunk. But really, just like in air, we see the first travelers that are coming back are really the loyalists and the folks that have cruised before. So very consistent with what Peter had shared. The other thing that could not agree with anymore with the information presented in terms of the need for customer centricity and really this customer centric framework from a cruise standpoint, and really setting that customer up to be able to engage the way they want to. And I think the role of digital is incredible. So whether it's pre-cruise or integration with the cruise lines, their individual apps, so the customers can, transact on their phone, click and collect. They can set appointments for personalized shopping. But we also want to have a safe shopping experience for those that want to come into the store, continue to offer experiences. So from our perspective, it's really omni-channel and really letting the customer transact the way they're most comfortable, but making sure that we have a presence in all those channels. I think that's really important. And finally, I would say last, from a cruise perspective, that, you know, the cruise lines have always had a focus on safety, and it's even going to be more prevalent as we move forward, and everything that we can do to inspire confidence, I think, will be really important on safety.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And finally, Stuart, could you offer some of your thoughts on those two presentations?
Yes, thanks, Charlotte. First of all, thanks to Peter and thanks to Anson for the presentations. Much appreciate that. I think where we all are collectively in the industry right now, we need some good data and some good reference points to allow us to navigate our way through what's going on, and what Peter and Anson shared was very, very helpful. I think there's two things we need to keep in mind when we look at the data that Peter shared in the first instance, which was this willingness to consider, people will consider returning 61% in the next 3 months, which is a very positive. And I'm in Sarah's boat. I'll be one of the earlier ones going out there, I think, in terms of catching up with family and friends back in Scotland. But I think the thing we need to consider at this point will not only be the desire, but the economic capability of people to actually go and travel. Because the challenge that we're facing right now is not just it's a health thing, but it's a health thing followed immediately with the consequence of an economic impact, which is going to be huge. And I think this is the bit that as an industry we've got to be very conscious of, is not only the willingness and the desire of people to do it, but their ability, their financial ability to do it. So there are two things. Part of that is confidence in terms of the health scenario and feeling confident, and that will be allayed by the vaccine. And as and when a vaccine comes along, that's the point when everyone's going to be able to take a sort of, I feel like everyone's holding their breath right now, and everyone will be able to go, oh, okay, I can go out without worrying about it. So I think that's the one thing. That will also have the spin-on effect into the economic life generally, which will stimulate economies globally. We've all seen the IMF numbers. It talks about, I think the original projections they were making was 3.3 economic growth globally this year, which is now negative 3 point something. So it's a huge swing in terms of what we're expecting to happen globally. And that's going to have an impact on people's ability to pay the ticket, as well as the factor of who's going to be there as airlines to ship people around. So I think these are the two factors that really start to kick into play. I think coming to Anson's presentation, I think there was some great stuff in there, a lot of which, it's not that I would say a lot of it I've heard before, because a lot of the trends, I think that the key message that I was taking from Anson's one was the speed with which things is going to happen is going to accelerate. And all the things that Anson was talking about there, we've all probably heard in presentations over the last little while. But the key message I'm taking from Anson was the speed with which it's going to happen. I think this moment in time that we're living through is creating a disconnect, which is going to cause a significant shift in how people use digital and how people use apps and all sorts of things that they maybe didn't use before. And everyone, those who move quickest in terms of being able to adapt to those new technologies and leverage those new technologies and exploit the things which will be consequent to this window of time, because people will be beavering away in the Silicon Valleys and elsewhere of this world to create the new apps that will fill the gaps that exist and are being created by this time that we're living in. So I think that combination of offering value and being able to meet those needs, I think they will be telling factors in allowing any of us to make good ground. But the critical thing, the number one thing, is confidence of shoppers and travellers to be able to get back out there. That will be the critical factor, the telling factor in how long this window of time is.
Thank you, Stuart. That was really interesting, and I especially like the way you highlighted the speed at which things are bound to change at this point. Interestingly, you mentioned a lot of things about utilising various things such as online and e-commerce, omni-channel. Lisa, you mentioned that approach. Using that kind of topic, how do we basically increase penetration and conversion levels once passengers start travelling? How do we, what is the key to driving traffic into stores once passengers do start feeling confident enough to travel again? And that brings me on to our second poll. Michael, if you could load that up for me. See if this works.
Sure. Coming right up, Charlotte. 1 second. Okay. So here we go.
As you can see here, there's 1, 2, 3, 5 options there for you to have a look at. So if you could all vote now, that would be great.
So remember, if you can't So to click on the screen, you need to click on the View in Window Mode button, which is below the bottom of the 4 buttons that you've got on your GoToWebinar panel, and that should free up the screen, and you should be able to click on the quick poll.
Just give it a few more seconds to collect as many votes as possible.
Just how people have voted, or 2/3 of people have voted so far. Okay, so we're closing the poll now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we're going to show the results.
That's interesting. So it looks like the majority believe that the key to driving traffic into stores in the post-COVID-19 era will be reassuring passengers of health and safety measures, not hugely surprising, but followed by attractive promotions and travel retail exclusives. Yes, I think we can all agree it's hugely important. Staff wearing masks and providing sanitizer, limited number of customers in stores, cafes, 1/3 of you, and an improved digital presence. Okay, so digital is still up there as well. Interesting that the staff wearing masks. As part of Peter's presentation, we noticed the numbers that perhaps thought that would be intimidating, but perhaps that differs from different regions and people's comfortability with it. Perhaps those in Asia would be more comfortable seeing staff wearing masks, and those in other parts of the world perhaps might find that more off-putting. Okay, so if we can close that poll.
Okay,
Sorry, Michael, carry on.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions from delegates asking, what is the attendee size? So how many people are being polled out? We've got just over 500 people attending. So those results are based on a panel of 500. And Peter's presentation, some people were asking, that panel is 1,500 people. So I hope that answers your questions. Back to you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, I noticed there was a few questions coming up to that effect. I wanted to pick up on particularly a point made by Anson in so far as the influence of KOLs and micro bloggers and micro influencers, and it got me thinking: is this something that perhaps, obviously, some suppliers have already turned to these type of people to boost their brands in not just travel retail, obviously, but all over the world. But Lisa, is this something that Starboard would consider, or do you think it's still not quite relevant? Do you think it's still the brand's responsibility to employ these sort of people to boost popularity of duty-free shopping on board?
You know, it's very regional. So in our Asia experience, the KOLs and social media is very important. And we partner with our cruise line partners and really do it through them, through their brand. And we certainly see it becoming even more important in the United States, but definitely we learned that lesson pretty big in Asia to begin with.
And another point, this actually came up in Anson's presentation as well, but I know, Peter, you have mentioned this to me on more than one occasion, the use of data and the fact that we as an industry are almost obsessed with collecting data, but perhaps not enough of us really use it to the right effect. Anson, you're nodding your head there fairly emphatically. I'm guessing this is something that you're constantly reminding people to do.
Yes, Charlotte, without a doubt. I mean, it always amazes me the number of clients and big corporates that have these massive data lakes, and yet they really haven't employed the right tools to slice and dice all of this data. So again, as I said, we've done a lot of research, and you know, a lot of people have collected that data, but simply they've retained it, but they haven't used it. And I think that will probably change with a lot of these new tools as well, Charlotte. And as I said, and I think Stuart made a point here is that the speed of change is going to be so critical here. The other thing, Charlotte, I just wanted to just share with you, because I think Peter made an interesting point about the business travelers. You know, I mean, I do think the business travelers, this is an area that perhaps will get impacted because of COVID-19. Interesting enough, Zoom, you know, one of those conference tools, on December the 1st, Zoom had 10 million daily active users. As of last week, they had 300 million daily active users. And I think that's, you know, that sums it up in terms of the technology that is being employed now, that we can set up all these calls and we can have all of these online meetings. And there's going to be a lot more of these cost pressures, but the technology is here now. And again, I think the smart companies are going to be deploying a lot more of that technology in the future, Charlotte.
Indeed. I just wanted to, we're going to actually move to our Q&A from audience participation very, very shortly, but I thought I'd ask a question that actually came from the audience, but it was posed by quite a few people. And again, it's for you, Anson. In various forms, this question came up. How does the 85 million domestic tourist trips in China compare to last year's Golden Week figures? I believe, was it Golden Week that you were referring to?
Yes, it was, Charlotte. Again, I mean, as we well know, China is a very large place. So a drop in the ocean compared with last year. But the fact that, you know, we have come from, I think, a very strict lockdown to a situation where we now have literally 85 million domestic tourist trips taking place literally, you know, on the first 3 days of May. That's quite remarkable. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. I would say to everybody, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We are going to see some level of back to normal, but as I said, it's going to be a new normal, Charlotte. And I do think we are going to see, as I said right at the beginning, I said we're going to see different speeds. So we're going to see different regions at different speeds. And I do think that China, North Asia, we're going to see that open up probably a lot sooner than we are Europe and, for example, the US, quite frankly. But again, let's wait and see. The challenge we have here as well, don't forget, we've already been through our second wave. So Hong Kong, for example, we went through the first wave of COVID. We've already done the second wave. The last 2 weeks, no COVID cases or a couple of imported cases of travelers returning back to Hong Kong. But this could be, unfortunately, a long drawn out affair as well, Charlotte. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay, to that effect, we've also heard talk of revenge spending or revenge shopping, particularly coming from Asia and particularly China. Whether, again, this is something that is a bit premature to talk about, I don't know. But I guess we'll see that if figures are sustained in the next couple of months.
Yeah, and again, just to add on to that, we've seen a number of corporates, L'Oreal, LVMH, you know, a number of these players have actually reported an uptick in China. And those consumers in China, the challenge is that they are not going to be traveling anytime soon outside of China. So I think we are going to see the domestic market see a ramp up. So I spoke to a number of those retailers and those brands who are actually quite confident that we are going to see a bounce back in China. But unfortunately, those Chinese consumers are not going to be traveling overseas anytime soon. And of course, as we well know, that we're not going to see them on the streets of London, Paris, Milan, and other places as well. So that, I think, is still going to be a very challenging environment. Also, Charlotte, Starbucks mentioned that they believe that they'll see a return back to some level of normal in September across China, and they've got literally 4,500 stores across China as well.
Thank you, Ansel. That's very interesting. We now, as Michael has prompted me several times, to start the Q&A with the attendees. We've had so many questions. I was going to remind you that there is a capability to answer questions in your GoToWebinar grey module, and to be honest with you, there's not really a need to remind you, it doesn't look like, because there have been so many questions coming in. I'm so pleased to see that everyone is really interested in the material that they've seen so far. Michael, do you have any specifically that you'd like to ask first?
Yeah, well, there's been a recurring question coming in. Martin Westbury, Christoph Henkel, Dents. The question really is, everyone's talking of a new normal post COVID-19. Should we expect retailers and airlines to have a new approach to trading, or should suppliers expect longer payment terms, demands for higher margins, and increased investment? And that question is put in different ways. How do you see the relationship between suppliers and operators evolving as a result of the crisis? How is that going to evolve now in post-COVID world? So perhaps we could ask Lisa, Stuart, and Sarah to address that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I would say that from our perspective, it's made the relationship stronger. It's, almost like sharing the pain. And it's a three-way relationship. So between Starboard and certainly our valued partners and all the brands that we sell, in all the different categories, and then also with our cruise partners. And I do think there'll have to be a new normal. And the thing that was interesting about all the talk about data is so much of the old models and the way business was done before is completely irrelevant with the new normal. So I think in terms of both commercial constructs and things like that, it's really about rolling up the sleeves and trying to find those win-win partnerships and really defining what the new normal is, because a lot of what went on in the past just simply is not tolerable anymore from a model standpoint or from a financial standpoint.
Okay,
Stuart, would you like to pass comment on that? I know from the supplier perspective, we've spoken to many in the last few months who are obviously finding it enormously difficult and often feel like the burden often lies with them. Do you feel like your relationships with retailers is as healthy as it should be right now?
I think the burden's felt across the whole chain. I don't think suppliers are the only ones who are feeling the angst and feeling the agony at the moment. Whether you're a retailer, an airport, an airline, everyone's taking an impact at this particular point. I think I fully agree with Lisa in terms of going out and looking for the win-wins, going out and looking for the opportunities, and there will be opportunities out there. That's for sure. I think the critical thing comes back into this, the length of time that this thing takes to be resolved, and also where the economic wealth is residing. Anson makes the point about the high-end brands there being very positive. I think we all read that story about the Hermes shop that did $2.3 million in one day when things opened up in Guangzhou. There's money out there, but the growing income inequality that's existed means the people who've got money will still have money and they'll be able to travel and be able to spend. It's the people who are maybe sort of slightly down the economic strata who are going to be far more heavily hit by this economic downturn, who've lost their jobs, who've been furloughed. And I think those are the passengers when they, first of all, those who want to travel have the economic capability to travel. It's making sure the right propositions are in front of them that's going to encourage them to put their hard-earned money, their money hand in their pocket, put their hard-earned money on the table, so that we can all share in the benefit of that. Now then, what's the right economic sharing between the airport, the retailer, and the brand? Well, that's one that's been going since this industry existed and will continue to roll on, and time will allow that one to tease itself out. But I think opportunities will definitely be there. But we have to look for the new opportunities, and just looking through the rear view mirror won't help us. We've got to look through the windscreen and say what's coming at us now.
Sarah, I actually have a different question for you with a view to getting through such a huge volume of these questions. Ryan Hill has actually asked the question, do we think there is justification to increase allowances in order to boost global travel retail sales? Now, obviously, you're not in charge of making that happen, but obviously you could play a part in lobbying for that.
It would be a welcome gesture, I think, if some governments would agree to that. It would be a way for them to support their transport sector without actually making a huge difference to their own income. So yes, I would say that that would be something that we would like to see. How reasonable it is to lobby for it, I think, will depend on different jurisdictions.
Indeed, indeed. We're also receiving a number of questions talking about the way merchandising and selling on the sales floor will fundamentally change or might fundamentally change. People are asking questions about what is the role of sales staff, for instance, how will that change, and will they almost be, perhaps in the very beginning, be possibly a little bit redundant, and also potentially how does merchandising change with a view to perhaps decrease in sampling? And as Peter mentioned, there'll be a lot less confidence from consumers wanting to touch products and actually feel them. I'd like to put that sort of question to Stuart, really, because again, you're very much in the front line when it comes to thinking of different alternative marketing activities, in-store experiential activities. I know that that's something that Nestle is very keen on continuing to do, but do you have ideas at this point how you will change your strategy when things return to some sort of normalcy?
Well, I think, first of all, the numbers that Peter shared, the great stuff, data that Peter shared at the front, sends a very clear signal to all of us that some of the actions we need to take are going to be completely countercultural to what we've done in the past. In the past, it's been about getting in front of the consumer and sampling them with the whiskey or the chocolate or the whatever it happens to be. And right now, the thing we're going to have to do is back off and actually say we need to leave people space so that they feel comfortable to get in. We're in a world of 2 meters, keep your distance at the minimum. And that's completely countercultural to how we built brands and retailers have engaged consumers and the whole walk through stores. And it's all about making it as accessible as possible. And I think in the short term, one of the things we will have to do is just create space for people. So the learnings that Peter's been sharing, and I think it's this looking at things through a completely different lens and making people feel comfortable, giving them the confidence to go in and not feel like they're going to be mugged by some brand ambassadors who want to spray perfume on them or give you some chocolate. It's not. And that's a completely 180 from where we've been in the past. But short term, I think that is. And then that has negative implications for brand ambassadors and people who work in our industry. And that's people's livelihoods as well. So it's not comfortable to talk about, but in the short term of driving the economic activity and encouraging people back in, for me, I think it's something we'll have.
Lisa, I see you nodding in agreement over there. I mean, from your perspective, how do you think things will change on the shop floor?
Yeah, we're fortunate at Starboard to be part of LVMH, so there's been a task force on really thinking through what will that customer experience be in store and what are the best practices that can be adopted. And it is everything that Stuart's saying in terms of giving people their space and no use of testers and only things that are single serve, single use items. Even thinking through what do you do with sunglasses and things that people repeatedly want to try on. So it is really thinking through the entire customer journey from the time you warm them up to get them into the store and what you did. It's basically rethinking the entire process and going through every single step and making sure people understand that safety and well-being have been thought through for the entire experience.
Well, thank you all. We're going to wrap this up fairly soon. Michael, do you have any really important, really good questions that you want to add? I just think we'll have time for one more.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, there's a good question coming in from John Woodhouse, and again, others have reiterated this one as well. John Woodhouse from Schaefer. So a number of, to put it bluntly, a number of key retailers not paying their suppliers. This is creating a huge cash flow problem for them. Travel retail isn't just the stores. So will the associations, and this is for you, Sarah, also push for any support given to flow downwards to the suppliers who may bankrupt otherwise?
Wow, I'm beginning to wish that I hadn't logged in again now. No, the duty-free associations have steered well clear of all commercial issues for many years. We have members who are from all sections of the industry, and I'm afraid that we must leave commercial matters to the commercial companies involved. We have sympathy for every part of the supply chain, but we can't get involved in that. Sorry.
Peter, sorry, Michael, if I can just also add, because I think this is a very important point. We are now seeing, of course, a big discussion about purpose-led corporates, and there are going to be a lot of questions asked of you by those supplier groups, by the consumers, as well as how you reacted during the coronavirus. How did you react during COVID-19? And will you be seen to come down on the right side of history or the wrong side of history? And I think a key message that I'm hearing from some of my big clients is that they've also got a part to play in the survival of their supplier ecosystems. Because if the suppliers die, then equally that's going to impact all of us. So I think that's very important in terms of your values and being a purpose-led corporate. And quite frankly, I've seen some bad behaviors, and we've seen millions and millions of dollars worth of orders equally being cancelled by some of those big global retail groups out of the factories across ASEAN and across Asia Pacific. So I think that's going to be important, purpose-led and demonstrating your values. That's really going to be
Charlotte,
important.
can I pick up on this thread from Anson? I think it's a really important point that he's making, because I think one of the things at a corporate level, one of the things that as Nestle we're doing, and I know we're not alone in this, so it's not we're banging the drum for ourselves here. It's the shift from, there's been a move over time to purpose-led thinking. I think the next step that comes within this is going beyond purpose. The purpose is the why. Why are you there? And what we're going to see the evolution into is from why are you there to how are you bringing that to life? And exactly as Anson's saying, it's demonstrating what you're doing to help that ecosystem that you're part of is going to be critical in terms of helping consumers feel comfortable about the organization that they're buying their products from. So I think that's going to be another one of those step changes that's going to happen over a period of times. People have been talking about what they do to why do they do it. And now the next step is going to be, and how are we doing it? Not just why are we doing it, but how are we doing it? Tangibly, what are you doing day in, day out? And that will also help reinforce, from a brand owner's perspective, the confidence of their consumers to come and buy their products.
Well, I think we've managed to conclude on a really seminal point, and one potentially that lots of us will have differing opinions on, especially those in attendance. I think we're going to have to wrap up now. I just wanted to thank all of the speakers. You've been tremendous today, and we apologise to all the attendees for those small technical glitches. These things happen in every webinar, I think, all over the world, and on live television, as we've all noticed in the last few months. And I was also really like to thank all our attendees, and thank you so much for your interaction. It really makes such a huge difference, and I think we can all agree that this platform and this webinar has been extremely successful in engaging the opinions and perspectives of all of you, not just the speakers, myself and Michael, but also attendees. I think I'm going to hand over to Michael for an announcement from TRBusiness. Actually, we have a very exciting announcement to follow shortly, but as I said, I just wanted to say thank you to you all. And one more point, I know that, as I said, that we've had so many questions come in from the attendees, and I was hoping to ask the panelists if they wouldn't mind answering perhaps some of them over email, or perhaps with me or Michael at some point, just to offer some of those, some more insight and more value for people in the following week or so. Would you be happy to do that? Just as I said, over like an email or something like that.
Happy to.
Happy to.
Great. This is where I mute you all and pretend that I heard you say yes. And so, Michael, I'll pass on to you to make that important announcement.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So yeah, we're really delighted at TRBusiness to be launching what will be an industry-wide campaign. We want to reach out to the global industry, and when I say industry, it's duty-free, travel retail, airport commercial partners, cruise companies, their commercial partners, really the industry holistically, for what we believe is a really important initiative. We've seen it duplicated in other industries, and this is I'm just going to change slide. This is the duty-free care for carers campaign. So basically what it is our message to the healthcare workers that we are really deeply grateful for all they've been doing over the past weeks and months. And we really want to give them something to look forward to when travel, international travel does resume, by offering special benefits, discounts. It could be a free cup of coffee, it could be 15% off, 20% off, whatever. Something that when they're traveling internationally again at an airport or on a cruise ship or a ferry, they can come in and get their thank you note from our industry. This really is going to be for all frontline staff, whether it's doctors, nurses, even the hospital staff like cleaning and maintenance workers, carers in elderly homes and so on. We want to sort of really reach out to all the workers who have been on the front line over this very difficult period. So it's really to thank them and really show them and the world that although we as an industry have been significantly impacted by the coronavirus, financially of course, we want to play our part in thanking them for their unwavering service and care. So what this will entail basically is there's a page, we'll be making the story live on the website very soon. There'll be a page on the TRBusiness.com website, Duty Free Care for Carers, that you can see there, where all stakeholders can come and log in their pledge, whatever that might be. It could even be free tickets for the Win a Car or Win a Million raffle that many retailers put on these days as well. But it can be very simple, like a free cup of coffee as well. You set the terms and conditions. There are standard procedures in terms of how health workers can show that their identity and where they work, which is fairly straightforward. You lodge that, and then we'll be publishing that on another page on the TRBusiness.com website, but we'll also be promoting it widely on social media and to the general public. So we really like to reach out to all of you in the industry to join us with this campaign and show that the global duty-free and travel retail industry and our partners are all very grateful for our global healthcare workers. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Michael. And as you know, we plan to put on several of these webinars over the coming months, and we have our next one, I believe, in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So please look out for our communication. We'll be reaching out on the website and obviously over at email in that respect. And that's one last thank you from me to everyone who's attended.
And thank you from me. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to everybody who's taken the time to attend this webinar. The slides will be shared afterwards. You'll get a recording of the webinar by email in the next few minutes, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinars in the coming weeks. Thank you to all, and have a great day, end of day, evening, and stay safe and keep well.